Welcome to episode 3 of the Uncomfortable Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Allen, and as always, I'm stoked to be here diving into some uncomfortable topics with you today. This is actually part 2 of a 2-part little story about diving into the uncomfortable and about how into the uncomfortable actually began and how it got its start and just the whole story behind it. So if you haven't listened to episode 2, part 1, I'd suggest you go back and listen to that first and then listen to this one because it all ties together. But anyways, real quick, let's just sort of recap last week and what we talked about and sort of where we're at in the story so far. So essentially we just talked about school and my experience with school, all growing up and just the struggles I had and the struggles that I had with the conventional path life sets you on. And then we discussed sort of how I still followed it and how I dove into it anyways, and I went to college and I was doing all the things, and then how I was at college and I had a business professor tell me that, well, he confirmed my worst fear, which was that I was going to have to stay on this path, and then if I stayed on this path, I was going to have to find some job that I hopefully liked, and then I was going to have to work that job for the next 40 years of my life, that's if I was lucky, maybe longer. And then if I finally was lucky enough, I could retire. And then that's when I could start living and doing the things that I loved and finally be happy. And I said, no, that's not for me. I can't do that. And that was when I made the decision, okay, I'm going to leave school. I'm going to go pursue a different path. This is my calling. This is something I have to follow. And so that's what I did. And that's when I had the idea and decided to start Into the Uncomfortable. And so kind of where we left off last week was I was talking about how while all my friends were doing homework and working on that stuff, I was working on building Into the Uncomfortable. I was working on building a website, coming up with a domain name, writing blog posts, creating all the social media accounts and doing all this kind of stuff. While all my friends are working on homework, and I even remember in the back of a lot of my classes, I was sitting there working on this stuff, pretending to be taking notes. Which, whatever. But so anyways, that's essentially where we left off last week. And so just continuing the story, I remember the day that I decided to post my first blog post and officially launch Into the Uncomfortable into the world and announce it to anybody. I don't remember if I had decided I was going to do this ahead of time or if it was just that day I was like, all right, today's the day. But I do remember sort of the way it happened was I had class that day. And then I just remember that whole class, it was like a early afternoon class. And the whole class, I was just sitting there and I was just like, today's the day. I got to post this thing. And this is going to happen. And I'm all anxious thinking about it. And I'm going to finally go for this. I'm going to finally take this leap into the uncomfortable. Wonder what people are going to think. Wonder how it's going to go. Wonder if anybody's going to like it. Is it good enough? Should I post it? Should I even be doing this? What the heck am I doing? The imposter syndrome is just running rampant in my mind. And I remember that class ended and I hurried back to my dorm room, which, by the way, I really took for granted. It had one heck of an ocean view. But anyways, it's beside the point. So, but I just remember hurrying back to my dorm room, and then I got back to my dorm room. I'm sitting there at my desk, just staring at this blog post that I wrote that's just pouring my heart out to the world. And I'm sitting there, I feel the sun hitting my face, my legs bouncing, because of the anxiety, and my hands are sweating, and I'm just like, okay, all right, let's do this. And I remember just sitting there and I finally clicked publish on that post and I put it out into the world. And I remember, I don't know, it's whenever we do stuff like that, whenever we start something new, especially when it's something like that, where we're just, all you got to do is push a button and just send it out into the world. I remember it, we always just feel like there's going to be this big confetti moment or there's going to be something happening and something's going to change and all of a sudden everything's going to be different. And I remember it just being I clicked publish and I was like, well, okay, there it is. It's live now. And then I just remember I just pulled out my phone and got on Instagram and I was just like, hey guys, I started a blog. This is what I'm doing now. And But I remember it literally took me probably at least 30 takes just to get that Instagram story right. One, just because I was terrified, and two, just because I was I was not good at talking on camera at all at that time. Um, but yeah, I just remember. I mean, I posted it and it was out there, and yeah, and then after that, I just kind of kept posting post after post for a little bit, and then I think I had posted probably three blogs, and then that was around the time COVID hit, and everything changed. I was up at Lake Tahoe with my girlfriend, who's my wife now, um, and we were just up there. It was spring break. We were up here with her family, and then all of a sudden we got the word that COVID hit and school is canceled, and so we had to drive all the way back from Lake Tahoe down to San Diego to Austin, Texas, all in about 2 days. And that was not fun, but that was a learning experience. That was a whole dive into the uncomfortable itself. But anyway, so all that happened, and all of a sudden, within like a matter of a week, I found myself back in Texas, back home, and everything had changed, and everything was completely different. And honestly, it was such a blessing that I decided to leave school when I did, because and going back, I actually hadn't told anyone I was dropping out. I didn't tell anyone until about April, and I published that first blog post in February. So no one even knew that I was leaving school. I hadn't told anyone at all except, the people close to me. But I didn't mention it in the blog anywhere. I didn't say anything about that. I had just said that this is just a place for people who want to get uncomfortable and live an uncomfortable life. But anyways, and so I got back home, and I'm home and just working on school, and then just writing and making content. I saw some old videos that I had made during quarantine. I did like a whole series called like the 4 steps of diving anything uncomfortable. And so I was just kind of didn't know what I was doing. But I was just going for it. And it's really interesting. Just want a quick note for anyone that's looking to start something, or maybe you're in the process of starting something, whether it's a blog, podcast, maybe it's a business, maybe it's whatever the case may be. Maybe you're just putting your art out there. Whenever you initially launch something and release something, you'll have a lot of your family and your friends, especially if I'm blessed to have very supportive family, especially my mom is extremely supportive. Anytime I start something new, or anytime I've started something new, she'll always send it to all her friends. And anyways, thank you, Mom, for that. It means the world. But you'll initially have a lot of your friends, your family, and your family friends will be kind of your initial supporters for, right when you launch something. And then kind of as you keep going, they begin to flake off. And then, say like your first blog post gets all these people hitting you up and be like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is so cool that you're doing this. It gets all these, or your first whatever podcast or whatever gets this many downloads. And then like the next few have way less. And then that can often be really discouraging, because it's like, man, I guess people don't like this as much as I thought. Like, I guess this isn't as big of a hit as I thought. I guess, like, should I even be doing this? Maybe I'm not qualified. And that's when that imposter syndrome comes back. But that's where you got to keep fighting through, because those family and friends that support you, and that, that's amazing and that's awesome. And do not take that for granted, and be grateful for that. But anyone that flakes off, that's not your target audience. And the fact that they just flaked off is just a sign of that. And so don't be so caught up in those people that you forget to chase the people that you're actually trying to target and trying to help. And that's something that I've seen through this whole thing. When I first launched the blog, I had tons of people that, family, friends, and whatnot, who were immediately so supportive. And then, like, kind of as I kept going, I kind of just trailed off and flaked off. And that's fine. And there's no hard feelings there. And that's nothing against those people. But as I've gone on, then I've attracted new people I don't even know, people, complete strangers. But I've been able to form these like relationships with these people virtually, people I've never actually met in real life, through doing this and through something that has been helpful to them. So the moral of that whole story is just keep going. And that's honestly the hardest thing to do, is to start. And the second hardest part of all of that is to keep going, because it's hills and valleys. It really is. And you got to just keep going and got to keep pushing it and got to be focusing on the right people. But anyways, so going back to the story here. So I kept doing that through COVID. And then that summer I took an internship and was making some content there, but then I kind of began to pick up photography and I started my own media business. And that's how I actually got into podcasting. I produce and manage multiple podcasts. I do photography, videography, all that kind of stuff. And so I got into that over the summer, and then I kind of trailed off of Anything Uncomfortable. I still kind of do a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I trailed off of it. And then around this same time last year, around the 1 year launch of Into the Uncomfortable, I started posting some more again. I was like, I'm back and we're doing this thing again. And then kind of as last year happened, there was a lot of big life changes. I had moved out that summer of 2020, or the end of that summer. I moved out. I moved out of my parents' house. And then I moved further into Austin. I moved more into the city. And then around the same time last year, it was the end of February, I ended up moving back in with my parents just to save money, because my wife Grace and I had just gotten engaged, and well, let's face it, we were broke 20-year-olds and we needed to save up for a wedding. So, and just life together. And so I ended up moving back in with them, and that was a very humbling transition. But I was still just doing the media stuff. And then that summer, I was dealing with there was a lot of change going on and that's when we decided to move from Austin to Reno. And there's a lot of change going on, a lot of chaos, and I was dealing with a lot of mental health struggles, which is something that honestly I'm still just not super ready to talk about yet. It's still a struggle. But anyways, more on that in the future, down the road. But just through all of that, ended up trailing off again. And I ended up just being like, I'm not in a place where I feel like I can talk about anything motivating or inspirational right now, because I'm in this tough place right now, and I'm not feeling inspired myself. I'm not feeling motivated myself. And so I was like, I can't do this right now. This is too exhausting, and I'm just not in a place where I can do this. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to put it on the back burner. I'm just going to focus on other things. I'm just going to focus on life. And so really I did. I was just focusing on work. I was focusing on wedding planning and just everything going on, planning to move, and also just planning on getting better mentally. And so fast forward then, we move, we're married. And then I guess that's just when, after getting settled here a little bit, then I decided, you know what? I miss writing. I miss Into the Uncomfortable, because this whole thing helps me more than it helps anybody. And that's just the reality. This thing helps me like crazy. This is literally I still 100% support therapy. I've done therapy. I believe in therapy. I don't think this replaces therapy, but this is a form of therapy for me, because by being able to talk about this stuff and getting into these uncomfortable topics, this holds me accountable. I'm not someone who wants to talk and not do. I don't want to just be telling you to do all this stuff, but I not be doing it myself. So really, like I've said from the beginning, this is a community, and this is not me talking at you. This is not me. I'm not an expert in anything, really. I'm just a student of life, and I'm just in this with you. And so this whole thing helps me like crazy. And even just over these past couple of months of getting back into the Uncomfortable and writing more, and now starting this podcast and creating just content for Into the Uncomfortable, it has helped me like unbelievably. It inspires me and it pushes me, and all of you inspire me. And I get messages from you saying like, wow, like I can't believe, like, you have no idea how much this means, and you have no idea how much this helps me. And none of that's to like pat myself on the back or say like, good job me, but it's to say like, I know this is helping you, but this is helping me too. And that's essentially like when I knew I was like, I got to get back into this. And like, it's just funny. Everything's really come full circle with all of this, and how it's like 2 years ago was back when I was starting this. And now I feel like I'm just starting again. Just because since about summer of 2020, I mean, things have just been so off and on, but I feel so focused in this now. I feel so locked in, and I feel so happy with it. And I'm just so passionate about this. I'm so passionate about diving into the uncomfortable and the mission behind this. And I'm just so believe in it. And I so believe in living in an uncomfortable life, because that's how you live a fulfilled life. You live in comfort and you sit in comfort, and you're never going to experience that fullness of life. You're just going to, I mean, who wants to live a mediocre life, you know? And so that's what this is all about. And, but anyways, so that's kind of back up to where we are now, and we're doing this. And I just decided literally a couple weeks ago, to start a podcast, and just decided, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. It's something I've thought about since the beginning of this whole thing, and been like, yeah, one day, but I decided, you know what, we're just going to do it. But anyways, so all that to say, that's kind of where we are now. And then as far as for the future goes, just going to keep building out this podcast. I eventually have plans to do things like short films and that sort of thing. Really my end goal with this, with Into the Uncomfortable, it started mostly with me telling a lot of my story and my stories, and then just like my take on things. But what I want it to evolve into is other people telling their stories and having conversations with other people, and being able to share those stories through podcasts, through written word, and through short films. And that's essentially the goal with it. I do also have some plans for some products and merch and that sort of thing. So hopefully we'll have something rolling with that towards later on in this year. But basically, moral of the story is we're just going to keep at it. We're just going to keep going. I don't have plans to go anywhere this time. And I've said that in the past, but I don't see anything like that happening, because this has been amazing for me, and I love being back. I love doing this. I love getting to have these conversations and talking with you all. But anyways, I appreciate you all for listening. I appreciate you all for following along and sticking with me as we start this thing and get it going. Obviously, I'm sure my storytelling skills could use some work. Reality is, like I said back on episode 1, this is an uncomfortable thing for me. The reality is I'm a very introverted person. I've got social anxiety, but social anxiety doesn't have me. And so that's the key there, is that this may be an uncomfortable thing for me. Talking on camera, talking on a podcast may be an uncomfortable thing, but I believe so much in it, and I'm so passionate in it, and I'm so passionate about sharing this message. So I don't care about any anxiety. I don't care about any fears, and I push through it because I know there's something greater on the other side. And I know that through getting uncomfortable, there's fulfillment in that. And the reality is, as well, the more you do something, the better you get. And I think we often want to be so perfect. Right when we start, we want everything to be so perfect, and we want to be so good at what we're doing, and we just want to be the best right away. But that's not how it works, man. Like, that's not how life works. You don't start as the best. You start sucking, and then you get better and better and better. What is the saying? Practice makes progress. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes progress. And there's actually a quote too I heard the other day. I've been doing an online design course, and the instructor in it, she said, no amount of training will ever make you perfect. And to a lot of people that would be like, whoa, that's, people would think that's negative and that's like a bad thing. And like, people would think that has a negative connotation behind it. But the reality is that's actually encouraging. That's actually exciting. That means you could always be getting better and you can always be improving. And so anyways, that's kind of a rabbit hole, I guess. But I just wanted to say, like, look, don't feel like you got to be perfect to start. I'm a picture perfect example of that. These first 3 podcasts, I know one day I'll probably look back at and be like, wow, that was embarrassing. But honestly, you got to just not care, and you got to just go for it, and you got to just put yourself out there. And as long as you're being authentic, as long as you're being yourself fully, and you're not trying to put on some kind of a facade, and you're not trying to be someone you're not, people will ride with you, and you will connect with people, and you will have an impact. And you just got to keep going. Please don't give up before. So many people give up right before the finish line, and they don't even realize it. Just keep going. Just keep working at it. Just keep getting better. I promise you it's worth it. But you can only get there if you're willing to get uncomfortable. You can only be great if you're willing to suck. You can only be extraordinary if you're willing to step out of the ordinary. And if you're willing to get uncomfortable and run at fear, flip that fear into fuel, and just keep going. So I just want to leave you with that little bit of encouragement today as we conclude this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. And thank you all for listening. It really means the world. Your support means the world. The kind words and messages that I receive from you all really mean the world to me. And yeah, so just excited to just keep going in this thing, to keep doing this. And I just want to extend the invitation right now and just say to you, if you're listening to this and you would like to be a guest on this podcast and you would like to share your story of getting uncomfortable, or someone that would, please reach out, and I'd love to chat about it with you. So anyways, all that to say, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review. It helps us out a lot. And yeah, it means the world. And if you got value from it, please share it with someone that could also get value from it. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave us a like, a subscribe, and then drop a comment about your biggest takeaway. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. Until next time, keep diving into the uncomfortable. What's up, guys? Jake here again. Just wanted to thank you real quick for listening to this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I ask that you would please go leave us a rating or review wherever you're listening to this. Really helps us out, really helps us tell more people about the uncomfortable and to help more people live fulfilled lives. So if you could go take 2 seconds to go do that, that would mean the world. Now go take one actionable step towards your dreams today and to apply what you heard here on this episode. You got this. I'm rooting for you as always. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Uncomfortable Podcast.
Take yourself out your comfort zone. If you want to be ordinary, you ain't even got to listen to me.
Comfort is overrated. We've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.